Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I am your host, Jamie Bateman, and I'm super excited today to have a special guest on, Josh Cantwell of Freeland Ventures, freelandventures.com. Josh has a really good story that we're going to dive into and pull out some lessons learned. So this is on paper, you're the ideal guest, Josh. So I'm really excited to have you. How are you doing today, Josh?
I'm fantastic. It's been a fun day already. Working with my broker on a building that we are selling. We actually had our call for offer date last week. And so we've got 7 offers to sort through. So we dealt with that this morning.
That's a good problem to have.
That we're buying next Friday, which is a $6.5 million acquisition. It's kind of on the smaller side for us. And so we're just buttoning up the final closing for that, going through the final closing checklist. And we're actually going to be closing about 2 weeks ahead of schedule. So that's exciting. And tonight I'm going to watch my daughter play some volleyball. So I'm a huge fan. My daughter's in high school. And,
that's so cool.
Even some varsity volleyball. So I'm going to go watch her. So that's a full fun day for me.
Yeah, definitely. That's a packed day. That's cool. My daughter actually just started playing volleyball in high school as well. She's in 10th grade and she's really taken to it. So I'm excited.
It's a great sport. I mean, I grew up playing football, basketball, baseball, right? And then I even played college football. And there's no sport that I've ever played or coached or watched that is truly a team sport like volleyball. Like you cannot have one person that's just your superstar. Like in football, you could have an unbelievable quarterback like Josh Allen last night. The Bills scored 1 million points. You could have one basketball player, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, that dominates the floor. Volleyball is truly need all 6 kids on the floor. So it's my favorite of all the sports I've ever played. So yeah, fun stuff.
That's really cool. So other than what you have going on, this week and next week, what kind of tell our audience who you are today as far as this year, what you have, who you are and why we should listen to you.
Sure. So, so I've been an entrepreneur for 25 years. I guess we start with that. I've never had a job. I've never had a boss. I'm 46 years old. I graduated from college and went immediately into financial planning, and had no salary, no regular paycheck.
All commission.
I ever got was $2,000, and it was a commission for selling financial services products like IRA rollovers, life insurance, estate planning, stuff like that. I remember sharing that check with my girlfriend, who at that time was still in college. And we were both like freaking out about how this huge $2,000 paycheck. And that was my first entrepreneurial paycheck. And it's been entrepreneurship for the last 25 years. Today, we own 3,000 units of apartments. We've done 19 apartment syndications. We've owned as many as 4,400 units. We sold off about 1,300 units last year. And we are one of maybe the 2 largest buyers, owners, operators of apartments in the greater Cleveland area, Cleveland, Ohio. We also buy in Columbus, Cincinnati, and Dayton. And we're an owner operator, meaning we buy them, we acquire them, we syndicate them, we manage them, and we do the CapEx from soup to nuts, A to Z. We don't outsource any of it. I have an incredible team, and I've built multiple 8 and 9 figure businesses. And so I've been very blessed to be an entrepreneur for 25 years, and I have a ton of knowledge around that subject. Some of it I'll be able to share today. So that's who I am and where I've been.
No, that's unfortunately we have to gloss over so many things that I would love to dive into. But maybe bring you back and pick your brain some more if you have a few minutes. But yeah, that's fantastic. So obviously the focus of this show is from adversity to abundance. We're all guaranteed to deal with adversity, challenges, obstacles, some kind of hardship in life. And what I've found is oftentimes entrepreneurs, I haven't figured out the exact relationship yet, but it seems like entrepreneurs have this knack for overcoming adversity, getting through adversity, and a lot of, whether it's the entrepreneurship leading to the ability to overcome that adversity, or probably conversely, getting through that adversity creates the ability to apply lessons learned in business, which I think is what we want to drill down on today. For the listeners out there, let's go back and kind of you can pick it up wherever you'd like as far as age or circumstances, but like to kind of lead us up to your major example here of adversity that you've dealt with, which I know is a big one.
So yeah, absolutely. So look, I think the first thing to think about, Jamie, when it comes to entrepreneurship is that you are essentially, when you say that you want to be an entrepreneur, when you define yourself as an entrepreneur, if you identify, this word identify is popular now, identify as an entrepreneur, you have basically said that you are going to forego all the security of a job, a W-2 job, security of working for somebody else in exchange for personal freedom. Okay.
Sure.
You're not signing up to make more money. You're not signing, although that's your part of the goal. You're not signing up to have control of your time, although that's part of what you're trying to do. What you've ultimately done is say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to chart my own course. I'm going to chart my own path. And I want to do that because I want to have true personal freedom to be able to make all my own decisions and define who I want to be around, who I want to associate with. If I want to go borrow money, invest money, if I want to build a business, and who I want on the team, all of that now becomes your own choice. But what you've foregone in exchange for that freedom is a lot of what people view as security of a regular day job with benefits, a 401k, a W-2. And so I was very fortunate that my dad was an entrepreneur. My dad had done both. My dad had worked in a big Fortune 500 company, had worked at Sherwin-Williams, and my dad caught the bug as an entrepreneur when I was in grade school. And my dad actually, the reason why he became an entrepreneur is because when we were in 6th grade, my dad filed for bankruptcy because he was fired from his job. So he was fired from his job. He couldn't land another job. This is in the middle 1980s. The economy was, remember back then, there was still a lot of inflation. The economy was moving slowly. This was before Ronald Reagan kind of restarted the economy. And my dad couldn't land a job. So for a year, he went without a job and he filed for bankruptcy. So my personal entrepreneurial journey actually starts with my dad's entrepreneurial journey and bankruptcy. That's where it began.
So yeah, that's unfortunately an additional layer of adversity that had to happen, I guess. So
now, back then there was no Facebook, there's no Instagram. Like my dad was very private. So I didn't even know that my dad had filed for bankruptcy until I was well into my 20s. So like 15 years later, did they tell me? I was like, why was dad home that whole summer? Why was he cutting the grass on a Tuesday at 1:00 in the afternoon?
Yeah.
And because he had been fired and because we had filed for bankruptcy, which means we literally had no money. We had like $1,000 in our bank account. There was 5 of us in the family. And what my dad decided to do after that bankruptcy was he decided to become an insurance salesman and then also decided to get into financial services. Then my dad ended up getting a job in an insurance brokerage. Then he ended up taking over a division. Then they spun off that division. Then he bought the division. So within 10 years now, from the time he went from bankruptcy, now my dad owned the company. And what he ended up buying and spinning off was a employee benefits company. So they had employee benefits for major companies. At one time, my dad's biggest client was Advanced Auto Parts, Fortune 500 company with 30,000 employees.
Wow.
So my dad went from bankruptcy to having the condo in Hilton Head, the 3rd or 4th car, all of these things within 10 years because of entrepreneurship. Right.
And you're seeing this all firsthand. So you're
exactly. So super fortunate, Jamie, to be able to witness that in my own house. So when I graduated from college, it was natural for me to say, hey, I've been watching my dad do this. Now my dad was busting his ass. He was leaving the house at 6:37 in the morning, was getting home at 7:00 at night.
Right.
You know,
that's the part I think people like to gloss over. You know, it's oh yeah, it's just create this side gig and then it turns into a full-time job. But it's easy. I get, it's like, no, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into your dad's success and your own success. But
for him to be able to afford, right, for me to go to private high school and then for my brothers to all be in code and put us through college.
Yeah.
A very short 10 or 15 years after filing for bankruptcy It was
That's
like,
amazing.
wow, like that's a real success there in a very short amount of time.
Absolutely.
And so for me, but so my option was when I was getting out of college, like, did I want to follow my dad's path? Did I want to go work for my dad?
Right.
For me, it was like, I just wanted to be working on my own. So when I got an internship in financial services that allowed me to set my own schedule, work late hours if I wanted, cut out early if I wanted, earn my own paychecks, 100% commission, my dad flipped out. He lost his mind. He was so upset
Really?
because he's like, dude, I just spent how many tens of
Oh,
thousands
right.
in college,
Yeah,
and now you're not even going to have a salary?
sure. Right.
Not only that, but then at 24, I became a landlord and I bought my first piece of real estate. And my mom's like, not only do you not have a job, not only do you
Right.
not have a salary, but now you think you can be a landlord too? Like, what is wrong with you? And so
It's
I looked at my dad's example and said, hey, like, what did you expect me to do?
right. Right. Exactly. I mean, I actually was a little bit surprised that he was, I get the college expense in hindsight, that makes sense. But the fact that he had fought the secure job had ended the way it did, and then entrepreneurship went much better.
Yeah.
You know, I would have thought maybe he'd seen the upside there, the potential for you to be an entrepreneur, but, and maybe he later changed his mind. I'm not sure, but yeah. So 24, you're a landlord, and then pick it up from there.
Yeah. So, well, then it became okay. Financial services was really good to me.
Yeah.
I became a fee-based financial planner. I'm 22, 23, 25 years old, but I recognize, Jamie, that a lot of my most successful clients own real estate. They didn't have all their money in the stock market. So I saw
Sure.
firsthand when I did what was called a fact-finding appointment with a new potential client, and I learned about all their financial plan and what they owned and their net worth. The most successful guys owned buildings. They owned apartment buildings. They owned retail strip centers. They owned buildings and they leased them out to restaurants. They owned real estate. That was the biggest part of their portfolio. So I started going to the weekend warrior boot camps. I started learning everything I could about real estate while I was still doing financial planning, started buying up real estate. I bought my first duplex. I bought a rehab. I bought another duplex. I bought another rehab. I started acquiring a rental portfolio and doing some flips on the side. And then in 2000, I graduated from college in 98. By 2005, I was like, I'm out. Like I have the real estate bug. Like I'm 100% going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I forego, I was making about 150 to 175 grand a year in financial planning and left it all behind because I just was like 100%. I was so drinking the Kool-Aid, Jamie. I was so in that I'm like, I don't want to do this financial planning thing anymore.
Sure.
Like most people, I got into residential. I was flipping houses and I needed still, even though I had some money and I had some success with my financial planning, I still didn't have a lot of money where I couldn't just put down 40 grand on a house and then 40 grand on another house and 40 grand on another. I needed to do things with no money down, right? No income, no asset, no money down type of stuff. So I got into wholesaling. I got into flipping. I got into that kind of thing. And we had an unbelievable run from 2005 to 2011. We started doing pre-foreclosure, short sales, notes, discounted notes, that kind of stuff, much like you did with your former podcast.
Yeah.
And we were one of the big national speakers. We were doing events in Vegas and Dallas, and there were 300, 400, 500 attendees there because there were foreclosures in Cleveland about 3 years before the foreclosure crisis nationally. But like 10 publicly traded companies, Jamie, that folded, that went bankrupt or merged, that all were in Cleveland. So there was a glut of housing and a lot of people without jobs. And so we got into pre-foreclosures and short sales and negotiating notes and discounted debt and all that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
And it went really good.
The one thing, sorry, it touches on the fact that if you're paying attention, you're willing to roll up your sleeves and work hard and network, real estate is a very inefficient, I guess, economy, or part of the economy, if you will, sector where you can really make some good money if you can see the opportunity coming if you know what you're doing. In other words, yes, you can make money in stocks, but in general, real estate is a much more slow moving asset class, right? And so if you had, this knowledge way before anybody else did nationally, or maybe not anyone, but before the national media and most other people were talking about it, and you were able to use that and see that as an opportunity, and and profit from that. Sounds like, is that fair to say?
Oh, sure. And no question. And Jamie, not only that back then, but even today with apartments,
Mm-hmm.
like the building I'm buying next week is a 41 unit, but it's actually in downtown Cleveland. So it's a premier trophy A-class asset. And lots of other people would look at that deal, and everybody has a different business plan. So when you look at the yield or the spread between what we're paying for it and what it's going to be worth, you're exactly right that there's a tremendous amount of inefficiency in the marketplace. And somebody that is trained, that executes, that is networked well, that has access to a lot of private capital, they can take advantage of these inefficiencies. That's basically what we do today still, we just now do it in the commercial space. And we've been doing it really, really big time in the commercial space for the last 7 or 8 years. But those were those efficiencies back then. And it was a fun business, but it was very transactional. Like it was flip a house, it was wholesale a house, it was negotiate a short sale, flip a property, make a $5,000 check or a $50,000 check. Or we once made a $500,000 check, but then you had to go back and
got to go out and do it again. Right.
Yeah. And so we were kind of getting sour on it because it was so transactional. And at the same time is really when adversity really hit me and my family big time. In 2011, I'll never forget it, Jamie. I came home from work. I was doing the business of pre-foreclosure, short sale investing, foreclosure investing. I came home. I had 2 young kids, 2 years old and 1 year old. My wife was 8 months pregnant with our third. So we were knocking out our third kid in 4 years. And I came home and I was playing with my 2 little girls, and just like any new dad would be doing. And I laid on the floor in my living room. I looked up at the ceiling fan. I crossed my hands across my stomach. And just like that, I felt this giant lump on the left side of my stomach. And I was like, wow, that's big. And it's kind of only on the one side. It's kind of like in a weird place, like below my rib cage, kind of. And I was like, hey, honey, come here. I told my wife, Lisa, I said, come on over here, check this out. She's kind of poking around. And it's kind of, again, it's kind of odd shaped and kind of thick and hard like a rock. And she's like, wow, like that can't be good. Like that's in a weird place. I said, I know. I've never seen that before. I've never felt.
So there was no pain or discomfort or anything. I mean, it was just.
So I had back pain. I had back about 3 years leading up to then. Gotcha. And I had been, it turns out I was misdiagnosed for 3 straight years by 3 different doctors. One guy said, oh, it was arthritis from football, college football. Another guy said it was like some sort of inflammation or something.
Sure.
They prescribed like Z-Packs, steroids, and like, physical therapy. And none of them ordered a CT scan. And a CT scan would have told everybody that it was advanced pancreatic cancer. Wow. It wasn't pulled muscle. It wasn't, those kind of things. It was advanced pancreatic cancer. And I quickly learned that right about the same time, Steve Jobs from Apple Computer had just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And I had just learned that Luciano Pavarotti, the great opera singer, had died from pancreatic cancer. And I would learn very quickly that Patrick Swayze died from pancreatic cancer. And all of a sudden, I read that the survival rate for pancreatic cancer was about 6%.
Wow.
And I thought to myself,
I can't even imagine.
Holy, this is not good. And
what else is going through your mind at that time?
So what happened was when I felt this lump in my stomach, my wife's 8 months pregnant, and I went to my buddy across the street, my buddy Latul Farrow, Dr. Latul Farrow with the Cleveland Clinic, friend of mine from college, he's an orthopedic surgeon. So he's not an internal medicine doctor, but he's an orthopedic surgeon. I go over to him. He's like, Josh, that's in a weird place. It's not a hernia. That's not a sports injury. You need a CT scan. You got to go check that out. So my wife and I decided, because she was 8 months pregnant, we were going to wait till after my son was born.
Okay.
So my son's born, some complications with that, but he had a surgery shortly after he was born. He had some kind of cyst in his neck that was taken out. He was fine. So about 10 days after his surgery, I finally went and got checked out, and doctor pulled it up on the screen. He showed me my insides from the CT scan and said, Josh, see this big gray mass here? This isn't supposed to be here. I'm sorry to tell you, you have advanced pancreatic cancer. And my son was actually still in the hospital recovering from surgery. My wife had just had an emergency C-section about 3 or 4 weeks before that. So my wife is recovering from surgery. My son just had surgery. And now I've been told that I have advanced pancreatic cancer. And by the way, I still have a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old at home.
I was gonna say, but your other 2 kids went through my mind. Like, where are they?
Yeah. Yeah. This all happened actually the day I was diagnosed. It happened on my oldest daughter, her first day of school ever, her first day of 3-year-old preschool. And so we'll never forget, like,
Sure.
when your daughter goes off to school, it's supposed to be great. She's wearing the little dress and the little shoes,
Right.
and she goes off to school. And by about noon that day, I had found out that I was like deathly ill, very, very, very sick.
So question now, you hate to second guess, of course, but I'm just curious, had the original, 3 years prior, if they diagnosed it correctly, maybe this is a dangerous line of questioning mentally, I don't know, but were you advanced at that point, or, would it have been how would things have been different if it had been caught 2 or 3 years prior?
Yeah. I mean, nobody's ever asked me that. That's a great question.
Gotcha.
I've done a lot of interviews and I've talked about this a lot of times. Nobody's ever asked me that, but to think 3 years prior. So, 3 years prior, I had just met my wife, like, and we dated for a year, we got engaged, we waited another year to get married, and then we got pregnant like literally a month after we got married. So all that happened with my wife within 3 years for our first child. And then we had another child right away after that. So within 4 years of meeting my wife, we had dated, engaged, married, and knocked out 2 kids. And so if I had been diagnosed 3 years earlier, it would have been like we had only maybe had our first child.
Right.
And maybe
Gotcha.
I wouldn't have had my second. Maybe I would be going through all these medical procedures and surgeries.
Sure.
My family dynamic might be totally different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
well, and I do believe personally that everything happens for a reason, and we're getting philosophical here. So I was just curious if you thought about that, but so that's obviously not the way things played out. So how did things play out?
So I was very fortunate. My oncologist, Dr. Ali, referred me to, I'll get a little emotional about this, but he referred me to Dr. Matthew Walsh. Dr. Matthew Walsh at the Cleveland Clinic is a miracle worker. So I'll never forget when I went in, was diagnosed, I met with him. I got a second opinion, went back to Dr. Walsh. And I'll never forget, he had this $1,500 pair of Peruvian shoes on. I love shoes. Like the one thing I really enjoy is like cool, different shoes. And we were talking about his shoes. And so I'm sitting there very sick and we're talking about the surgery. And I'm like, wow, those are incredible shoes. And he's like, yeah, I got them from Peru. I'm like, dude, let me ask you, like, how much are a pair of shoes like that? It's like $1,500. I was like, can I touch them? Like, I love shoes. So we made this little connection. And so I ultimately was like, he's the guy. Like and I've heard from many people, he was a miracle worker in the operating room. And so we scheduled the surgery. It was the week of Thanksgiving, 2011. And I decided to have the surgery on a Monday because the week of Thanksgiving, nobody would know. Like, other than my immediate family, nobody would know that I was out of work. Nobody would ask questions if I took the week off. So I prepped my team. I told my real estate team that I was going to be out for possibly a very long time and they'd have to run the show. And I went in for surgery. The surgery was as complicated as it gets. The cancer mass was as big as your head. It was as big as a basketball. Wow. It was wrapped up in all my other organs. Dr. Walsh took out not only the cancer mass, but also he took out my stomach, my gallbladder, my spleen, most of my pancreas, most of my liver. He had to reconstruct the veins and the arteries leading to my liver because they were smashed and crushed by the cancer mass. I was in ICU for 3 days. I woke up about 36 hours after the surgery started. I lost 50 pounds in 3 weeks after the surgery. I had to relearn how to eat. All while my wife was at home taking care of 3 very, very small kids. I didn't work for 9 months. I didn't work for 3 or 4 months before the surgery. If you added up all the accumulated time off for preparation, doctor's appointments, my son, my wife having a child, my son's surgery, I took 9 months off of work, and my business totally fell apart. And I realized after the surgery was over that I had made a major mistake, is that even though I was in real estate, now the fact that I was so transactional came back to bite me in the butt big time. And selling products or selling houses, flipping houses, it was very much dependent, Jamie, on me going in and making the phone calls and talking to people and coordinating and being, a transaction engineer. There's a lot of training programs and guru programs out there that tell you be a transaction engineer. That's very real. That's very true. It very much works. Right. But if you don't go and be that transaction engineer that day,
right,
do you have a team that can transact without you?
And do you really have a business? I mean, in reality, it's another job. Yes, you don't have a boss, but you kind of do, because you're kind of enslaved to that role, right? I mean, you got to put food on the table. It's really not, at least the type of business you probably wanted. So, just, I know we're going to get into some lessons that you learned, and you've got those pretty well ironed out, it sounds like. So what's the transition there? I guess as far as, to be clear, the risk with this show is we gloss over all this pain and hardship, and we, that's not the intent. We understand that this is very real and was a very human experience, but we do have limited time, and we do want the audience to benefit from the show, of course, right? So transition us, what was the transition like, kind of from a mindset standpoint, from, say, when you woke up in the hospital to, reinventing your business? How did that application of lessons learned go?
Well, I think it started back to my father, right? My entrepreneurial mentor, but a very wise man. He said to me before the surgery, he said, "Josh, listen, there's going to be so many lessons that come out of this that, I hope you make it. We all hope you make it. We're going to assume that you're going to make it. And this is a major, major life event for you," he would tell me. And he would say, there's going to be some major lessons that if you really pay attention in the second half of your life, all the lessons that you learn from this experience are going to have a major impact on the second half of your life.
That's fascinating. I mean, that really is. And that's, you start comparing different people's adversity with other people, right? And in this case, you did have some time to prepare, right? So yes, you were surprised by the condition, but you had time to prepare for the surgery. And I mean, that is just wise beyond words.
Yeah.
That's
so the reason why we're here, Jamie, talking, and it's mostly because, and I want to recognize the fact that I got very sage, wise advice from my father to say, make sure you pay attention to what you learn. Don't just go through this and survive it.
Right.
Go through it, survive it, please, son, survive this. But also pay very close attention to what you learn along the way and use that in the second half of your life. Because he said it would be a shame if you weren't a totally different person after this than you are today.
So good. That's phenomenal advice. That's just, that's awesome. So
he says that to me. And so I started listening. I started really paying attention. And then, so one of the things I learned business-wise, Jamie, was that I hadn't really invested for cash flow. I thought I did. I thought the business was producing cash, which it was. It was throwing off a lot of income, but it wasn't producing true passive income. And so when I look at now, fast forward 11 years, one of the things that I think elite entrepreneurs do 8-figure, 9-figure investors do. We have a $300 million portfolio now. We have over 12, 13, $14 million flows into our business every year in rental income. And just that alone is a massive amount of cash flowing through our business.
Sure.
And I don't talk to a single tenant. You know, we have like 8,000 people that live on campus of our different properties, and I don't talk to a single one of them. And so what I realized in the mistake that I made is that I didn't invest for cash flow now and do things to create true passive income. What many entrepreneurs make the mistake of is they invest their own cash in their own business, but the business still needs sweat equity to make money. Well, when you add in the sweat equity, you've eliminated true passive income.
Sure.
So one of the things, and this is my number one characteristic that I learned in the number one mistake I made 11 years ago. And the number one thing that I focus on every day now is, how do I add more top line gross cash flow in the apartment business? We call it GPR, gross potential rent. How do I add more of that to my portfolio every day by renewals, turning units, adding more properties to our portfolio, selling off anything that's underperforming or things that are optimized where I can exit that deal, take the profit, and then invest as a limited partner as a passive, truly passive investor to build the passive income. Because the last thing you want to have is what happened to me. When you get ripped away from your business for 9 months and you have no true passive income coming in, then you almost have to work while you're trying to survive, like literally trying to just make it another day and stay alive and make it through the surgery and then make it through the recovery. And then imagine having to think like, how do I care for my wife and 3 kids still? So my bank account was dwindling down quickly. We were spending way more money. The business had expenses that we couldn't pay that were then going to fall onto me personally. All of that was the mistake I made 11 years ago. And I vowed that I'd never make that mistake again.
So what was the difference? It just quick with the business, 9 months or, between those 9 months, across the 9 months, what was the difference before and after, as if you did a quick snapshot of your business?
Yeah. So before we were easily in like generating between the flips we were doing, some of the coaching programs and the seminars that we were doing, our business was floating in the 4 to 5 million a year of gross income with about a 20% margin. So I was making 800,000 to $1 million a year of personal income.
Wow.
We went within that 9 months because I couldn't do any seminars, coaching. I couldn't really flip any houses or do any wholesale deals. I had to completely learn a new way. Our income the next calendar year thereafter was way under 2 million with still similar expenses. So now not only was I not making personal income to 800,000 to $1 million of personal income, we were bleeding negative about $300,000 to $400,000 to $500,000 that next year.
Wow.
There's $1.5 million in swing from $1 million to the positive to about 500,000 to the negative. And the cash that we had of both in the business accounts and my personal accounts was disappearing fast.
Right. Which is the last thing you need from a personal standpoint to get healthy and from a family standpoint, all the other factors, facets to your life. So I can imagine just mentally it's all feeding on each other. So, the business is hurting you personally, hurting your family, and it all works together. So how did you pull yourself out of that?
So one of the lessons I learned right before the surgery is I was able to get involved in a couple of deals truly passively. I was able to arrange the deal and arrange the debt, recruit the private money. But I had an operator that we knew I was sick, that he was going to do the deal while I was sick. He was going to basically fix the property up and we were going to flip it and sell it, or we were going to keep it. And he did the day-to-day operational work. And I arranged most of the private money and helped find the deal and structure it. And then, so my surgery was in November. In April, 6 months later, we got checks for about $100,000 from these 2 deals. About 50 to 60,000 of it was mine based on our split.
Hmm.
And I never saw the property more than 2 or 3 times.
That's awesome.
And I was like, okay, what did I just learn from that? Well, what I did was I was specifically focused on finding the funding, the true private money, not
Hmm.
not family office money, not
Hmm.
debt from banks, not institutional capital or venture capital money, but true private money from private investors
Hmm.
that I had relationships with that were willing to put up the money, even though they knew the circumstances with me. That aha moment for me
Hmm.
was like, hey, Josh, the money, the freedom is in the funding. If you, Josh, focus on relationships with true private investors
Hmm.
that can fund that last piece of the capital stack, like you get, debt for the first piece from a bank or from a private lender,
Right.
company, but the stack that most people don't get or fail to get, I'm going to focus on getting that.
Mm.
That was the aha moment. I became fanatical about, okay, what are the SEC rules? What's 506B? What's 506C? How can I
Hmm.
raise capital? Can I create a fund? Can I create a funnel? What are all the things I can do? Relationships. How do I create a pitch book? And all while I was still recovering, I was literally in my sweatpants up in my master bedroom because I could still barely go out. I could barely eat. I became fanatical about learning about private capital.
Mm.
So much so that today we've raised over $100 million. And when I say $100 million, Jamie, I'm not talking about $100 million from a family office or from an institution or from a
Right.
venture capital. It's $100 million from private investors, like the mom and pop private investors that have between 100 grand and 2 million bucks. A lot of guys with 200,000, 300,000, 100,000, 50,000, $500,000 in that range. And I just said, look, if I could get access to that type of funding, I could go buy any asset I want.
Sure. That
And
makes a lot
that
of sense.
100% of my focus. And so one of the other lessons I've learned
Yeah.
in fighting this is that the super elite entrepreneurs, the 8, 9 figure investors, including myself and guys and girls that I know,
Hmm.
they have one superpower. They have one super niche skill, one
Hmm.
super niche talent that
Hmm.
they're unbelievably good at. They recognize it, and that's all
Mm.
they do.
Okay. That's what they focus on. Interesting. Now, do you think your time, because you were recovering, you had more time to figure that out? I mean,
Way too much time. Yeah.
yeah,
I had way too much time to think.
sure.
I was literally spinning in circles, often
Gotcha.
many days, thinking about like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do?
Right. So, and that was more born out of, hey, this is what I'm really good at, is raising capital and relationships. Or how did you make that decision? That's what you want to focus on.
I think like most entrepreneurs, Jamie, um, it's a combination of reflection of what am I really good at? Like if I look back at my last day, week, month, year, 10 years, what was I
Hmm.
really, really good at? What did I really enjoy?
Sure.
And and this is so critical because this goes all the way back to my private practice when I was a financial planner. Like that lesson that I got from being a financial planner, of
Hmm.
coming out of college and doing that, following my dad's lead as an entrepreneur
Hmm.
into financial planning, is what led me to be comfortable around money.
Mm.
And
Got
I
it.
thought, like, when I was really in my joy, when I was really in my wheelhouse and having
Yeah.
fun, I was meeting with a client, or I was on the phone with a client, I was talking about money, I was helping them plan their future, or I was talking to a private lender. Like, I got off on that. I loved it. It was
Yeah.
fun. Yeah. It wasn't really in like doing the deal like buying an apartment. It wasn't really in the deal like buying a rental or flipping a house. It was in
Hmm.
getting the money to do it.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah.
Super, super
Uh,
niche.
Yeah. So, and it's really relationships and dealing with the money, yeah, and talking about money. And so sounds like that's what,
The other thing, Jamie, was it was out of desperation. Like when you
yeah.
face that kind of adversity, which you
Yeah.
talk about in the show,
Right.
when you are facing adversity and you are desperate, you get really freaking creative. Like you try to find ways to
Hmm.
solve problems faster, quicker, because you freaking have to.
Yeah.
Like,
Your back's against the wall. I mean, you have no other options.
right.
Sure. Makes
So
a lot
that
of sense.
lesson that my dad said, you're going to learn a lot of lessons. I was like, okay, well, I'm learning too many here. Like I'd like to learn less, but I learned, wow, like the comfort of being successful, making that 800,000 to $1 million actually made me less creative. It made me less flexible. It made me less like I wasn't as good at solving problems because I didn't feel like I had to because I was making this big income, right?
Sure.
The desperation, the adversity, I became really creative out of pure desperation, right?
Yep.
So when I recognize I got to solve problems and what am I really good at? Raising money. What do I really like? Raising money, talking to people about money. I'm like, all right, let's focus
Let's
on
do
that.
that.
Where
Yeah.
it goes.
Makes sense. So the first lesson was you essentially were too active, or remind me exactly what the first lesson was.
So really the first lesson to turn this into a positive, right, is invest for cash flow now.
Right. Invest for cash flow now. But
Don't
that ties into you were too active and too transactional in your business. So invest for cash flow now. And then the second one.
The one major one, Jamie, is this is part of the desperation lesson I just talked about, is that entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, people that come back from adversity realize that they're 100% responsible for their own life. Nobody is coming to our rescue.
Mhm.
Like I realized that even though if I was going to survive, I was going to have a major physical recovery from this major surgery. But I also realized nobody was going to come and fix my business. Nobody was going to come and fix my income problem, my
Sure.
debt problem. Like I had a major problem and nobody was going to come to my rescue. So I had to get really creative. Like I just talked about, that desperation made me realize I'm 100% responsible, right? I can't blame anybody else. I'm the one that got sick. Like, so let's go fix the problem. That's the second major lesson. The third one is you have to realize that most successful entrepreneurs are really only good at one or two things. They have a major superpower that they're good at, and then they leverage it and they focus on it and they focus on it and they think about it and they execute on that. Most entrepreneurs, including me, Jamie, have major faults, major things we do terrible, major things that we're not good at. But this huge portfolio that we've built and all this income that's coming through our business is because I focused on one superpower, which is I'm going to be really good at understanding the rules, understanding the laws, talking to the attorneys, networking with investors, and raising capital. And then I'll figure out where to park it all. Is it going to go to one fund? Is it going to go into an apartment building? Am I going to buy self-storage? Am I going to buy retail? Am I going to do a rental portfolio? That didn't matter. What I was going to buy didn't matter as much as I was going to go get access to all the cash.
And I think that what that really speaks to as well from the investor standpoint is they're investing in you. They're investing in the relationship, your track record, you as a decision maker, as an entrepreneur. Because otherwise, it sounds like the investors, for the most part, weren't overly tied to a specific asset class or strategy, which just speaks to your ability to communicate and develop those relationships and deliver on previously on prior deals. So that's awesome. Okay, so that's the top three. I know we have six more, right?
There's 9 or 10. I probably won't have time to get to them all, but
sure.
One of the things I think, let me skip a couple. And one of the things I think that I've learned over the last 10 years that's been critical to my success is that really successful entrepreneurs and big income earners, they're able to scale by using what I call the one-to-many concept, the one-to-many, which is you're one person, Jamie, I'm one person. We're speaking through this platform to many people.
Yeah.
And every major successful entrepreneur is never, you realize, never doing like one-on-one stuff. They're not doing a one-on-one lunch to raise money. They're not doing a one-on-one training. They don't do anything one-on-one. They do everything one-to-many. So the question becomes is how can I speak? How can I teach in front of massive crowds? How can I speak? How can I teach instead of to one person to 10 or to 100 or to 1,000? How can I get my message out to hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people? How can I write a book that tells my message? How can I host a podcast that can, tell my message? How can I have a YouTube channel, a Facebook platform, an Instagram page, whatever that looks like, a LinkedIn profile, whatever that is? there's so many great social media platforms, from the written ones to the video ones to audio like this. You have to scale one or maybe two of those platforms really well and create a following of people who believe in you, who will invest with you, who will invest in you, whatever that is. And every major entrepreneur, like, they have that type of one-to-many concept nailed. They have one platform that they're awesome at, and they have a crowd that watches them, that follows them, that listens to them. And as I got larger and larger into apartments, I had to raise more and more and more money. And my YouTube channel, my podcast, my different platforms all became massively important. And I realized when I put out one message, like this one podcast with you, there's going to be tens of thousands of people who are going to hear this.
Yeah.
And that allows me to have a thought leadership platform and a message I want to deliver, but also raise tons of money, because the people who are on the mic, they automatically get a sense of authority, right? If you've read any kind of book, like Robert Cialdini's book called Influence, one of the major influences is authority. When you host some sort of one-to-many concept, one platform, this is a big one. And I realized back then I was having far too many like one-on-one trainings, one-on-one meetings with investors. I had a little lunch. I had a little, soup with somebody. Forget all that. Now I barely leave my house, right? But I'm on these platforms and I have a major, major following and influence now.
Yeah, that's really good. Now, did that evolve over time, that principle, or was that specifically? Okay.
We started a podcast with no clue what we were doing in 2013, like 2014. Yeah. I remember, if you know Michael Blanc from his apartment, like Michael was on my show. It was like the third show he ever did. And now he's massive and he's got all kind of great stuff going on. But we just did it because I'm like, well, we had a pretty successful webinars that we were doing. And I'm like, this podcasting looks kind of cool. So that was a big one. Another major lesson, Jamie, was listen, every major entrepreneur and 8-9 figure investor uses technology as a weapon. Like they use software, like we use Infusionsoft. We use a program called Builder Trend. We use a program called HappyCo. We use a program called Appfolio. We use a program called MailerLite. We have all these softwares, these technologies. And I'm not just, playing with Facebook and flipping through. We're using software as a weapon, so much so, Jamie, that we tell our staff, if it's not in the software, it didn't happen.
That's pretty good. That's good. Well, so, I'm happy that I'm familiar with at least a couple of those. So, we use Appfolio as well. Yep.
You want to scale as a CEO. Like, I don't have time to talk to people one-on-one and find out what the hell's going on. Numbers never lie. Right. So if I could see the numbers in these different softwares, whether it's we send an email, what was our open rate? We send an email, what was our click-through rate? We have a podcast, how many downloads did we get? If we raised capital, if we did a webinar, how many people attended? If we have a 300 unit apartment and how many of those are occupied? How many are paying? What's the effective economic vacancy? I can see all that. Like, that's really I pretty much do this. I work out in the morning. And then I get in front of these softwares and I use them as a weapon, and I can make decisions without talking to anybody. Whereas back before, when I was doing a very manual business, it was like, okay, let's have a meeting and talk about these deals and how we're going to get them across the goal line and how we can make $40,000 on a deal. And we had to have a meeting about it, collaborate on all of our notes and what was in our head. Now it's not in the software. It didn't happen. And so that's a major one, right? That's a major, major one that I learned. That's a real thing, that like technology is amazing, but the adoption rate of technology is terrible. So many companies don't adopt it. Well, we tell our people, like, don't tell me, don't call me, don't text me and tell me. Put software and I can see it. Right?
That's major one. Yeah, that's a really good mindset shift and practical application as well. Are there any other kind of lessons learned or principles you want to hit on before we start to wrap up here?
Yeah, I think another major one real quick is service. I realized that service trumps price. Okay. With our apartment buildings now, we buy like 1960s, 1970s, 1980s vintage, but we do a major renovation of the apartment complex. So we'll spend $8,000, $10,000 in each unit, upgrading it with luxury vinyl, white shaker cabinets, black matted hardware, stainless steel appliances. So we'll do that in the B class suburbs. We'll buy like a C class type of asset in a B class suburb, and we'll renovate it like an A class downtown property. And we get major rent bumps. We'll take rents from $700 to $1,200.
Yeah, because if you did that in the C class neighborhood, it wouldn't support that much value, right? So
B class suburbs, people want that stuff, right? If they don't want to buy a house, and right now we have such an affordability problem in the United States,
right? So you weren't one of these investors who hopped in the last 2-3 years and kind of just rode the wave then?
I've been doing this a long time, my friend. I'm definitely not one of those guys. But obviously the last couple of years have been good to us, but we've been investing in apartments for a long time. And certainly we sold off some assets last year that happened very fast. And we had a quick hit on a building that we bought and sold, but that's not our strategy. Our
bread and butter, right?
Renovate, refi, and keep forever. So service trumps price. If you give people good service, good management service, a good product, a good unit to live in, take care of their maintenance issues and work orders quickly, we can charge a premium price. Right? White glove service in all of our businesses, from how I treat my staff to how my staff treats our residents and how my staff treats the maintenance guy, the property managers, right? White glove all the way down. Service trumps price, because if you provide great service, then you could almost charge whatever price you want. You can get away with charging a lot.
Now, would you say that same thing applies in your business with raising capital? And, go ahead, speak to that.
Absolutely, Jamie. So many investors and apartment syndicators, they rely on their software. They'll put the deal in their software, and then they'll send out a notice to their investors and say, hey, I have this new deal, go subscribe. I do the exact opposite. When I have a deal that I know is going to go, that we write an LOI gets accepted, I tell my assistant, get everybody on my calendar, one-on-one meetings with everybody. So for like the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'll be packed with one-on-one after one-on-one, Zoom call. And I'll say the same damn thing, 30 or 40 investors. But then when I go to host a webinar to raise capital for that deal, I've got 50 to 90% of that deal already sold out.
Locked up.
So then when I go to the rest of the investors that I haven't had a chance to talk to yet, and I say, hey, we're going to raise $5 million for this $20 million complex, but you know what? I'm sorry. 3.5 million is already spoken for. And it's really hard committed, that 3.5 million. Then I have no problem raising the rest. Again, go back to Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, and that social proof, which is another big influencer, that social proof of, hey, 35 other people already committed to this. So I'm just going to do it. Like it's the FOMO, right? It's the fear of missing out. FOMO, fear of missing out. I'm going to do it because everybody else did it. So that one-on-one to me is a big time secret sauce for us. And that allows me to also dictate the terms, right? So I can pay maybe a little bit less pref or pay a little bit less equity because of that service I provide, that relationship that we provide. People really, really trust us.
That's really good. You've decided where you want to compete, and it's not necessarily on price. It's on over delivering on the service side.
And remember, Jamie, my superpower, right? So when I'm on the phone with those investors one-on-one, my joy, I'm having fun,
right?
Superpower, and I'm going to win those conversations like 99 times out of 100 because I enjoy it so much. So not only does it give me personal fulfillment, but I also feel like I'm really helping these investors out by providing them an opportunity that they wouldn't get in the stock market, right? So it's win-win back and forth, and it makes me feel really good about what we're doing.
Makes a lot of sense. And you're very intentional about, it's not a one-on-one call with your property manager or your tenant. It's you're very calculated about how you spend that one-on-one time, it sounds like. So
absolutely.
So Josh, I know we're pretty much out of time. I know you have a thousand things to get to, I'm sure, but I really do appreciate you coming on. Let me ask you like a few really quick rapid fire questions before we wrap up. What is a book or two that you'd recommend for my audience?
So I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek, The Infinite Game. And I believe it's The Power of Why. I love his stuff. The book Who Not How by
Dan Sullivan.
I think Dan Sullivan's one of my recent favorites. I mean, I've got my Audible right here in front of me, but those, I mean, I love
Those are some good ones.
Infinite Game had a huge impact on me, Jamie, because
Okay.
it just made it reinforced that although apartments take a little longer, I'm playing the infinite game because I could hold that asset forever. Um, and so that's probably my biggest recommendation is that one.
It's a really good one. What's one question you wish I had asked that I haven't asked? Anything you want to touch on that we haven't covered?
Man, I don't know. I haven't really had anybody ever ask me that. But look, here's one of the things I would say is that I feel like social media is the ultimate time waster. So two of the other things that I didn't talk about that I'll just touch on for 5 seconds is one of the other characteristics is elite entrepreneurs have super time management skills. And number two, they refuse what I call the OCD screen sucking loop. So have you ever gotten on like Facebook and then all of a sudden you're also on Instagram and then also all of a sudden you're also checking your email and then you're watching Hulu and then a YouTube video and then 2 hours goes by and you're like, what the hell am I doing? I just blew 2 hours. So that to me, like I delete all the social media apps from my phone and I only re-download them when I need them because I think they're so good at stealing our time.
I think I learned that one from James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits. That's a really good recommendation.
Oh, is that a good book? I have that.
That's a really good book. Yeah, it's very practical. It's just about developing that. I think it's, goals are important. He's not knocking goals, but it's really the implementation of habits is where you should kind of focus your attention is his point.
Love it.
Anyway, where can our listeners find out about you and what you've got going on? Where can they reach out? Where do you want to point people to?
Yeah, just our main website, freelandventures.com/passive. There you'll find our portfolio, our background, bios, all that kind of stuff. A lot of our investment criteria is in there. People want to possibly invest with us and take a look at our deal flow. That's great. Everything's there. freelandventures.com/passive.
Awesome. Well, you're one of those guests. There's so much we could talk about that the only challenging part with this interview is, like I said before, there's so many rabbit holes I personally want to go down, and so that's a good problem to have. So this has been a fantastic show. Again, obviously, sorry you had to go through the personal adversity that you did, and we kind of do just gloss over it, but I'm very thankful that you spent this time and you were vulnerable with us, Josh, so that our audience can benefit and understand that I love just your father's advice about going into the adversity. That really hit me because, then you can kind of see it as an opportunity, and a blessing, if you will. Easy for me to say behind the monitor and the and the podcast mic, but I think our listeners could take from that, hey, I'm going to face adversity in the future. We don't know what it's going to look like, but there are lessons to be learned and impact to be made and wealth and these other things on the other side of that, if you're willing to have an open mind about what you can learn through that adversity. So for me, that was my biggest takeaway. I think I'll have several other big ones when I re-listen to this one, but so Josh, I know I rambled there, but I really want to thank you once again for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Jamie, thanks so much for having me on, man. This was a blast. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. To our listeners out there, thank you very much for spending your most valuable resource with us, and that's your time. Thanks, everyone. Take care.